It's 2 in the morning. You're awake. You don't know why. You went to bed at a reasonable hour. You weren't anxious. You weren't sick. Your phone says you have 4 more hours before the alarm, and your body has decided to just stop sleeping. You lie there. You stare at the ceiling. Maybe you reach for your phone, even though you know you shouldn't. Maybe you tell yourself something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Your body is doing something it has done for 300,000 years. Something modern science only rediscovered 30 years ago. Something every single one of your ancestors knew by name. So what did they do for all those hours between dusk and dawn? The answer would unsettle most people alive today. Most people assume the ancient night was just sleep, sunset to sunrise, long, deep, unbroken. That's not quite right. And the real answer changes everything we think we know about sleep, about culture, and about what it actually means to be human. Your insomnia might not be a disorder. It might be a memory. To understand why your body wakes you at 2 in the morning, we have to go back, far back. Before sleep was something you did in bed. Before night was something you survived alone. For most of primate history, the night was the enemy. Your ancestors didn't sleep on the ground. They climbed. You wedged yourself between 2 branches. You hoped your grip held. Because if it didn't, you fell. And something below was waiting. You know that sensation. You're drifting off, almost asleep, and suddenly you feel like you're falling. Your body jerks. You wake. That reflex is old, 6 million years old. Your body catching itself before it hits the ground. In 2015, anthropologists David Sampson and Charles Nunn at Duke University traced this transition in detail. For most of our lineage, sleep happened off the earth, on a branch, in a fork, wherever the predators couldn't reach. And the predators were patient. Leopards, cave lions, hyenas, wolves, all of them could see what you couldn't. Moving at night meant becoming food. For most of human history, sleeping alone was unthinkable. You slept in a group or you didn't wake up. Then, about 1 million years ago, in a place called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, something happened. In 2012, archaeologists Francesco Berna and Michael Chazan published a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Inside Wonderwork, 30 meters deep, too far for lightning, too far for anything natural, they found charred bone, plant ash, the same signatures repeated over and over in the same spot. Homo erectus had brought fire underground, controlled it, keep it alive. For the first time in primate history, you could close your eyes and not be prey. But fire didn't just protect you. It gave you something no creature on Earth had ever had. Sunset used to end your day. Suddenly, it didn't. Fire added 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours to every single night. Multiply that across thousands of generations, and you get something nobody has a name for: a second life. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. She had spent 40 years with the Jew/hoansi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, one of the last groups on Earth still living something close to how every human once lived. She recorded 174 conversations, day and night. And she found something that should not have been possible to find. During the day, around 80% of conversations were practical. Who hunted where? Which plants were ripe? Whose child was sick? Complaints, plans, logistics. Daytime talk was work. At night, around the fire, 81% of conversations were stories. Stories of distant peoples. Adventures from years ago. Myths about how the world began. Jokes that made the whole camp laugh. People stared into the fire. Expressions softened. They mellowed. They crossed time to their ancestors. They traveled, in their words, to places they had never been. Wiesner argued that this was where human culture was born. The campfire was the original theater, the original classroom, the original church. It is where we learn to imagine things that don't exist yet. It is where we became us. But the night was more than fire and stories. There was something else happening in those long, dark hours. Something modern science only rediscovered in the last 30 years. Something that explains exactly why you're awake right now at 2 in the morning, lying in the dark. In 2001, an American historian named Roger E. Kirch published research that changed sleep science. He had spent 16 years in archives. Old prayer books, court records, medical texts, letters from ordinary people, passages in Homer's Odyssey. He found over 2,000 references in a dozen languages, going back almost 3,000 years. And all of them mention the same thing: first sleep, second sleep. Before the industrial age, people did not sleep in one block. They went to bed shortly after dark. They slept for about 4 hours, and then they woke up. They stayed awake for an hour, sometimes 2. And then they slept again, until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. This was normal. This was how people slept. And what did they do during those wakeful hours in the middle of the night? Everything. A 16th century French physician named Laurent Joubert recommended that couples conceive children during this window because, he wrote, they would do it better. Others visited neighbors, wrote in journals, interpreted their dreams while the dreams were still warm, recited prayers, or simply lay in the dark and thought. Some traditions called these hours the watch. Others left them unnamed. And in many cultures that exist today, those quiet hours between sleeps are still considered sacred. Then, in 1992, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health ran an experiment. He took 7 volunteers. He stripped all artificial light from their lives. For 1 month, 14 hours of darkness every single night, the same darkness your ancestors would have known before fire, was easy to keep. Within 4 weeks, every single participant had slipped into the same pattern: 4 hours of sleep, 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness, then 4 more hours of sleep. Nobody told them to do this. Nobody suggested it. The pattern just surfaced. As if some old program had been waiting under the skin the entire time, buried under generations of artificial light. Ware measured their hormones during the wakeful hours. Elevated prolactin, the same hormone the brain releases during meditation. He called what they were experiencing a state of consciousness not unlike meditation, not sleeping, not full waking either, something in between. Something most modern humans have never tasted. It would be neat if the story ended there. A single sleep pattern, lost and now found. But here's where it gets complicated, because biphasic sleep is not the universal natural human pattern. In 2015, the neuroscientist Jerome Siegel at UCLA published research that pushed back. His team studied 3 of the last hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, the Tsimane of Bolivia, all living near the equator, all without electricity, all living closer to the original human lifestyle than any modern European ever has. They tracked 94 people. Over 1,100 nights of sleep, and these tribes don't wake up in the middle of the night. They sleep in one block, about 6.5 hours, 3 hours after sunset, until just before dawn. They don't lie awake at 2 a.m. interpreting dreams. They just sleep, which means the 2 sleeps Eckhart documented were real. But they were a northern pattern, long winter nights, 16 hours of darkness in a row, a body adapting to too much night. Closer to the equator, where most of human evolution actually happened, the night was shorter, the heat was the enemy instead of the cold, and people slept differently. There was never one ancient human night. There were many. The night belonged to geography, to climate, to whatever burned in your heart, and maybe that's the strangest part of all. In the 1600s, the first street lamps went up in Paris under Louis XIV to reduce crime. Then candles became cheaper. Then gas lamps spread across European cities in the 1800s. Then, in 1879, Thomas Edison turned the night into something you could switch off. The word curfew, by the way, comes from the French couvre-feu. It literally means cover the fire. In medieval towns, a bell rang at dusk and every fire in the town had to be dimmed, not for safety, because the night was supposed to be dark. Night was when the world rested. Night was when something else took over. Modern humans now spend 7 to 8 hours under artificial light after sunset. Light hits your retina at 11 at night. Your brain reads it in the morning. Melatonin gets delayed. Your sleep fragments. 300,000 years of programming overridden by a light switch. But researchers have found something quietly remarkable. People who go camping for 1 week, no phones, no bulbs, just sunrise and sunset, reset their melatonin cycles by nearly 2 hours. 1 week. That's all it takes for the old program to surface again. Your body still keeps the file. It hasn't been forgotten. It's just been overwritten. For 300,000 years, your ancestors lived 2 lives every 24 hours. The day was for work. The night was for everything else. Stories told beside a fire that someone had to keep alive. Stillness in the dark. Dreams remembered while they were still warm. A kind of quiet consciousness most of us have never tasted. So the next time you wake at 2 in the morning and lie there in the dark, wondering what's wrong with you, nothing is wrong with you. Your body is just remembering. A fire it never saw. A sleep it never had. And somewhere underneath everything, it's still trying to find its way back to the fire 05.